The old Victorian house on Maple Street was my entire world when I was growing up. My father inherited it from his parents, and I can still picture my mother bragging about it to everyone who'd listen. "Just look at these original hardwood floors," she'd say during her endless backyard dinner parties, gesturing dramatically with her wine glass. "You just don't find craftsmanship like this anymore." I was 7 when we moved in, and while my mother was busy showing off her prized possession to her friends, I found solace in my father's company. Dad understood me in a way Mom never did. He'd notice when I finished one book and immediately appear with another, like magic. "Hannah," he'd say, his eyes twinkling as he pulled yet another novel from behind his back, "I think you're going to love this one." And I always did. Mom didn't get it. "Hannah, sweetie," she'd sigh, watching me curl up in the window seat with my latest treasure, "wouldn't you rather go play with the neighbor kids? Sarah from next door just got a new bike." "I'm good here, Mom," I'd reply, not looking up from my page. I could feel her disappointment from across the room, but Dad would just wink at me from behind his newspaper. I wasn't completely antisocial. I had my moments of glory at school, especially after I started writing for the school newspaper. My stories always got people talking, and even the popular kids would stop me in the hallway to ask when my next piece was coming out. But my favorite escape was still my grandmother's house, with its magical library room that smelled of old paper and leather. "A writer needs to read," Grandma would say, running her fingers along the spines of her beloved books. "How else will you learn to tell your own stories?" She'd let me spend hours in there, bringing me cookies and hot chocolate while I devoured everything from classic literature to modern mysteries. I was 12 when the police showed up at our door. I remember every detail of that moment: Mom's coffee cup shattering on the kitchen floor, the officer's grave expression, the words "terrible accident" echoing through our hallway. Just like that, Dad was gone. Mom cried for weeks. I'd hear her at night, muffling her sobs into her pillow. But then, something shifted. The tissues disappeared from her nightstand, replaced by makeup and perfume bottles. She started going out in the evenings, coming home with a bounce in her step and color in her cheeks. "Life goes on, Hannah," she told me one morning over breakfast, applying lipstick in her compact mirror. "We can't stay sad forever." I nodded, but something felt off. The way she said it, like she was trying to convince herself more than me. I didn't know it then, but that morning marked the beginning of the end of my childhood. Mom met Richard at some office party. Within a week, he was having dinner at our house. Within 2 weeks, he'd moved in his things. Within a month, they were married in a small courthouse ceremony. It happened so fast, I barely had time to process that this stranger was now living in Dad's house, sleeping in Dad's bed, sitting in Dad's chair at our dinner table. The first time Grandma met Richard, I could see the concern in her eyes. She pulled Mom aside into the kitchen, but their whispered conversation quickly turned into raised voices. "Linda, you barely know this man," Grandma hissed. "Think about Hannah." "I am thinking about Hannah," Mom shot back. "She needs a father figure." "She had a father," Grandma's voice cracked. "And his memory deserves more respect than this." That was the last time Grandma was allowed in our house. Mom told her not to come back until she could be supportive. Richard never hit me or yelled at me, but he had other ways of making me feel unwelcome. He'd walk into a room where I was reading and immediately turn on the TV at full volume. If I was doing homework at the kitchen table, he'd start complaining about clutter. Once, when I was looking at Dad's old photos in the living room, Richard gathered them up and put them in a box. Mom watched it all and said nothing. Worse, she started sending me to my room whenever Richard came home from work. "Honey, Richard's had a long day," she'd say. "He needs some quiet time." Then Mom got pregnant, and whatever scraps of attention I had been getting disappeared completely. They turned Dad's old office into a nursery, cooing over paint samples and tiny clothes. When my sister Emily was born, you'd think she was the first baby ever to exist. One morning, I stood in front of Mom while she was feeding Emily. "Mom, none of my clothes fit anymore. I need new ones for school." She looked at me like I'd asked for a private jet. Hannah, do you have any idea how expensive babies are? We just had to buy Emily a new crib. But Mom, my jeans are all too short, and... For God's sake, Linda, Richard interrupted from behind his newspaper. The girl acts like we're made of money. When I was her age, I wore hand-me-downs. Mom sighed heavily. We'll go to the discount store this weekend. But this is the last time, Hannah. You're getting too expensive to maintain. Too expensive to maintain. Like I was a car with too many repair bills. I looked at Emily in her designer onesie, surrounded by new toys, and felt something inside me harden. I was trudging home from school one rainy Tuesday, lost in my thoughts, when I heard a familiar voice call my name. There, standing under a red umbrella with that mischievous smile I'd missed so much, was Grandma. Hannah, sweetheart. She pulled me into a tight hug that smelled of cinnamon and home. Oh, look at you. You've grown so tall. Grandma. I hugged her back fiercely, realizing just how much I'd missed her. I haven't seen you in forever. Her face clouded slightly. I know, dear. Your mother, well, she's made it clear I'm not welcome at the house anymore. Then her eyes twinkled. But what she doesn't know won't hurt her, right? How about we get some hot chocolate and catch up? At the small cafe around the corner, over steaming mugs and chocolate croissants, Grandma laid out her proposal. Your mother can't stop me from seeing my granddaughter, she said firmly. If she asks, just tell her you're out with friends. You do still have friends, don't you? And just like that, my life split in two. At home, I was the unwanted shadow, tiptoeing around Richard's moods and Mom's indifference. But my afternoons belonged to Grandma. We'd spend hours in her library, discussing books and writing. She'd help me with my homework, then we'd cook dinner together. Mom never questioned where I was spending my time. If anything, she seemed relieved when I'd come home late. This went on for about a year, until one night at dinner, Mom and Richard dropped their bomb. Emily needs her own room, Richard announced, cutting into his steak. She's getting too big for the nursery. I looked up from my plate, confused. But all the bedrooms are taken. Unless you're turning Dad's old office. We've decided to give her your room, Mom interrupted. You can sleep on the pull-out couch in the basement. The basement. The dark, damp space where Richard stored his tools and Mom kept old holiday decorations. Where the heating barely worked in winter. This isn't fair, I protested, looking to Mom for support. Dad would never. Well, your father isn't here, is he? Mom snapped. And quite frankly, Hannah, you should be grateful we're letting you stay here at all. Most kids your age would be happy to have any space to themselves. I sat there, fork frozen halfway to my mouth, as the full impact of her words hit me. Letting me stay here. Like I was some charity case they'd taken in, not the daughter who'd lived in this house since she was 7. Not the girl whose father had lovingly painted clouds on her bedroom ceiling when she was 10 because she said she wanted to sleep under the sky. When do you want me to move? I asked, my voice hollow. This weekend, Richard said. I want to start painting on Monday. Emily wants pink walls. That night, I lay in my bed for just 3 more days, and stared up at those fading clouds. I took a picture of them with my phone, knowing they'd soon be covered by whatever shade of pink Emily had chosen. Another piece of Dad erased. Another part of me displaced. Living in the basement turned out to be a blessing in disguise. The isolation gave me clarity, I needed a plan to get out. College became my lifeline, my ticket to freedom, and I threw myself into making it happen. Every afternoon at Grandma's house, I worked on my applications. My portfolio was growing impressive, editor of the school newspaper, 3 statewide creative writing competition wins, and a collection of short stories published in various youth literary magazines. My English teachers wrote glowing recommendations, especially Mrs. Peterson, who called me the most promising young writer I've encountered in 20 years of teaching. High school graduation day arrived with June's sticky heat. I sat among my classmates in the auditorium, scanning the crowd. Grandma was there, beaming proudly from the middle section, but Mom and Richard's seats remained empty. They'd announced at breakfast that Emily had a dance recital the same afternoon. After the ceremony, Grandma hugged me tight. "Your father would have been so proud," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. She slipped me an envelope. Inside was a card with a beautiful note and enough cash for a new laptop. The acceptance letters started arriving in March. 3 rejections, 2 waitlists, and then, the one I'd been hoping for. Riverside State University offered me a partial scholarship to their prestigious creative writing program. My hands shook as I read the letter for the 10th time. That evening, I decided to share the news at dinner. Maybe, just maybe, Mom would be proud. Maybe she'd remember how Dad used to say I'd be a famous writer someday. "I got into Riverside State," I announced, trying to keep my voice steady. "They're offering me a partial scholarship for their writing program." Richard didn't look up from his phone. Mom paused, fork halfway to her mouth, then set it down slowly. "Oh, Hannah," she sighed, and my heart sank at her tone. "We need to talk about college." "What do you mean?" "I've got the scholarship, and Dad's college fund." "About that," Mom interrupted, placing her hand protectively over her slightly swollen belly, a gesture I'd grown to hate. "We've had to make some adjustments to our financial planning. With the new baby coming." I felt the blood drain from my face. "What adjustments?" "Emily's private school tuition is already significant, and with another baby on the way." "My college fund?" I repeated numbly. "The money Dad saved for my education?" "Your father would understand," Mom said, her voice hardening. "Family comes first. Family comes first." The words echoed in my head like a bad joke. I looked at my mother, this stranger who wore my mom's face, and realized something that had been true for years: I wasn't part of her family anymore. I stood up so fast, my chair toppled backward. "That money isn't yours to spend." My voice came out sharp and clear, surprising even me. "Dad worked overtime for years to save that money. He wanted me to go to college." Mom's face flushed red. "How dare you be so selfish? Your sister needs." "Emily is your daughter with Richard," I cut her off. "Dad's money was for me. His daughter. Or have you forgotten that's what I am?" Richard slammed his hand on the table, making the dishes rattle. "I've had enough of your attitude, young lady. Your mother and I have put up with your ingratitude for years. It's time she made a choice: either you start showing some respect, or..." "Or what?" I challenged. Mom stood up slowly, her hand still resting on her pregnant belly. "Or you can leave." The words hung in the air like poison. "Leave?" I repeated. "This is my house, Dad's house." "Actually," Mom's voice was ice cold, "since your father didn't leave a will, the house legally belongs to me. You're 18 now, an adult. I'm no longer legally required to provide for you." I stared at her in disbelief. This woman who used to pack heart-shaped sandwiches in my lunchbox, who once held me all night when I had a fever, was throwing me out of my own home. "You can't be serious." Mom walked to the front door and opened it wide. The spring evening air rushed in, carrying the scent of blooming lilacs, Dad's favorite. "Get out." I stood frozen for a moment, looking at this stranger in my mother's body. Then something inside me shifted, like a key turning in a lock. Without another word, I walked down to my basement room and started packing. It didn't take long, most of my belongings were books anyway. I could hear Emily upstairs, asking in her little voice what was happening. Richard's gruff response. Mom's silence. 20 minutes later, I walked out of my childhood home with 2 duffel bags and a backpack. I didn't look back. Grandma opened her door before I could even knock, one look at my face telling her everything she needed to know. She pulled me into her arms, and finally, I let myself cry. When I'd calmed down enough to tell her everything, her face grew stormy, but her voice remained steady. "You'll stay here, of course. And I'm paying for whatever that scholarship doesn't cover." "Grandma, no, I can't ask you to." You're not asking, I'm telling. She squeezed my hand. Your father would never forgive me if I let his daughter's dreams die because of. She paused, choosing her words carefully, this situation. 3 months later, I was moving into my dorm at Riverside State. I'd found a job at the campus cafe that worked around my class schedule. Between that, Grandma's help, and my scholarship, I could just about make it work. Mom never called. Never texted. Never tried to find out if I was okay. I deleted her number from my phone but couldn't delete the ache in my chest that appeared every time I saw other students' parents visiting them on weekends. Junior year of college brought an unexpected turn in my life. While working on yet another creative writing assignment, I had an idea that wouldn't let go. It wasn't my usual style. Instead of literary fiction, I found myself writing a psychological thriller about a woman uncovering dark family secrets. Maybe I had some things to work through. You should enter it in the National Emerging Writers Competition, my favorite professor suggested after reading the first few chapters. It's different, raw, honest. I spent months perfecting the manuscript, writing between classes and cafe shifts, often staying up until dawn. When I finally submitted it under the pseudonym E.J. Blake, I didn't expect anything. The competition was notorious for attracting thousands of entries. Then came the call. Is this Hannah Morrison? A woman's crisp voice asked. I'm calling from Riverside Publishing regarding your submission to the National Emerging Writers Competition. I gripped my phone tighter. Yes? Ms. Morrison, we're pleased to inform you that the Glass House has won first prize. Furthermore, we'd like to offer you a publishing contract. I sat down hard on my dorm room floor. I'm sorry, what? The advance they offered was more money than I'd ever seen. The contract arrived the next day by courier, 12 pages of legal language that basically said they believed in me and wanted more books. The book hit shelves 4 months later. The reviews started rolling in. A stunning debut. Breathtakingly honest. A new voice in contemporary fiction. By the time I graduated college, I had 2 more books out under my pseudonym, both bestsellers. My second advance bought me a beautiful apartment in the city. The third let me quit my cafe job and write full-time. Grandma kept me updated on family news, though I never asked. Emily started first grade, she mentioned during one of our weekly dinners. And the little one, Thomas, just started kindergarten. I nodded, pushing my pasta around my plate. It was strange to think I had siblings out there who didn't know I existed. But I felt good without them, really good. Especially after I met David at a local bookstore where I was doing research for my 4th novel. He was a literature professor who had no idea his favorite new author was sitting right next to him in the classic literature section. E.J. Blake's latest book, he'd said, noticing me looking at a display of my own work. Brilliant stuff. Wish I knew who they really were. I smiled mysteriously. Maybe they just value their privacy. We married 2 years later in Grandma's backyard, surrounded by books and fairy lights. David insisted on reading a passage from the Glass House during his vows, still unaware he was quoting his own bride. We bought a house in a quiet neighborhood, with a library bigger than my old basement room and a garden full of lilacs. Life was good, better than good. And then one day there was an unexpected turn. It's time, Marcus, my publisher, announced during our quarterly meeting. Your new book is your strongest yet, and we think revealing E.J. Blake's identity would create exactly the buzz we need for the launch. Marcus was right, of course. The reveal was orchestrated perfectly, a major literary event at the Grand Plaza Hotel. Journalists, critics, and fans packed the ballroom. I stood backstage, my heart hammering. Ready? David whispered, straightening my blazer. No, I laughed nervously. But when has that ever stopped me? The moment I stepped onto that stage, camera flashes exploding like stars, I felt strangely calm. Hello, I said into the microphone. I'm Hannah Morrison, but you might know me better as E.J. Blake. The room erupted. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. My face was everywhere: magazine covers, morning shows, literary blogs. Mystery author revealed. E.J. Blake, literature's best-kept secret. The woman behind the words. Then came the message on social media. Hannah, sweetheart. I've been watching you on TV. You look so beautiful, so successful. I've missed you so much. Can we talk? I want to make things right. Love, Mom. My finger hovered over the delete button. After 14 years of silence, now she wanted to talk? I have nothing to say to you, I wrote back. Please don't contact me again. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. A week later, I was in my home office when David called up from downstairs. There's someone at the door. I knew before I reached the foyer. Mom stood on my porch, older but still recognizable. Her eyes were red and puffy. Oh, Hannah, she cried, stepping forward with outstretched arms. I stayed behind the screen door. What do you want? She wiped her eyes, composing herself with surprising speed. I've been following your success. You've done so well for yourself. No thanks to you. I know. I made mistakes. She wrung her hands. But I'm here because, well, Emily is graduating high school next month. She's so bright, Hannah. She got accepted to several colleges, but with Thomas still in school and the economy being what it is. I let out a harsh laugh. You're here for money? She's your sister, Mom pressed. And I know you're doing well now. Those books must bring in quite a bit. My sister? I interrupted. The same sister you gave my room to? The sister you spent my college fund on? That sister? Hannah, please. We're family. No. My voice was steel. We're not family. Family doesn't throw their child out on the street. Family doesn't steal their college fund. You made your choice 14 years ago, Mom. You chose Richard and your new family over me. You don't get to show up now, acting like a loving mother, just because you want my money. You ungrateful, selfish brat. Mom's voice rose to a shriek. After everything we did for you. She was causing a scene now, her voice echoing down our quiet street. You'd let your own sister suffer, just to spite me. I stepped back inside. Goodbye, Mom. The door closed with a satisfying thud, drowning out her continued screams. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. A week later, David called me into the living room, his face grim. On the TV screen was my mother, dabbing her eyes with a tissue as she spoke to a sympathetic interviewer. My daughter abandoned us, she sobbed. As soon as she got famous, she forgot where she came from. Now her little sister needs help with college, and she won't even answer our calls. Money changed her. Success made her cruel. The interview was just the beginning. Soon, my social media was flooded with hate messages from strangers who'd read Mom's posts about her heartless daughter who threw away her family for fame. Karma will get you, one comment read. What kind of person abandons their family, said another. Your poor mother. Your poor sister. I was shell-shocked until Marcus called. We're holding a press conference, he said firmly. Time to tell your side. I don't want to air my dirty laundry in public, I protested. Hannah, he said gently, you've built your career on telling the truth through your stories. Maybe it's time to tell your own. The next morning, I stood at the podium, cameras flashing. Grandma sat beside me, her spine straight as steel, her eyes clear and determined. My name is Hannah Morrison, I began, my voice steady. And this is the story my mother isn't telling you. For the next hour, we laid out everything. The college fund that was stolen. The basement bedroom. The cruel stepfather. The day I was thrown out. Grandma provided bank statements showing she'd paid for my education. I had old text messages, school records, witnesses from my teenage years. I didn't abandon my family, I concluded. They abandoned me. The only family I had left was my grandmother, who took me in when my own mother threw me away. I built myself up from nothing, with no help from the woman now demanding I fund her new family's dreams. The story broke like a tsunami. Author reveals years of family abuse, the headlines read. Mother's claims backfire. The true story behind E.J. Blake. My latest book shot to #1 on every bestseller list. Mom tried one more social media rant, but my lawyer's cease and desist letter shut that down quickly. One more false statement, I warned her, and I'll see you in court. She finally fell silent. That was 5 years ago. Life has settled into a peaceful rhythm since then. David and I have our quiet home, our library, our garden. Grandma comes for Sunday dinner every week, and we laugh and talk and share stories, real ones, honest ones. Sometimes I think about Emily and Thomas, the siblings I'll never know. I hope they're happy. I hope they're loved. I hope their mother learned to be better for them than she was for me. But mostly, I don't think about that part of my past at all. I've learned that family isn't always about blood, sometimes it's about the people who choose to stay when others walk away. Sometimes it's about building something new from the ashes of what was lost.